Hello today from the Dublin Conversations, where we welcome Professor Anne Gregory. Anne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to the conversation. So, as you say, I'm Professor Emeritus Anne Gregory from the University of Huddersfield. Corporate communication has been my life. I've been a practitioner before I became an academic. I'm a former president of the CIPR and chair of the Global Alliance.
Thank you, Anne. Then. So we'll take our journey, what we call the 5 steps to Dublin, and we're going to explore some new ideas, new thinking proposed by the Dublin Conversations, and would really value your candid and constructive response to these ideas so that we collectively can grow from the experience. So addressing the question, why the Dublin Conversations? We're in a world that's witnessing paradoxical change with greater fragmentation and yet greater convergence. And we need to rethink established ideas like advertising, journalism, marketing, public relations, and more, and replace them with better ones. We also have immense new knowledge. Can we harness that to create a better way forward? And can we co-create, come together to enable us to do both our jobs better, but also tackle the big issues of our era of growing distrust, divisive tribalism, or not being able to come together to tackle our big existential challenges? So what if we could unlearn how some of our existing thinking operates, discard ineffective, outdated ideas, while embracing fresh concepts and new ideas? So what does better look like? So let's have a Dublin conversation, Anne, and let's take our 5 steps to Dublin. So step 1 of our journey is identifying that confidence is the sort of foundation stone for the ideas developed by the Dublin Conversation, what it calls the Dublin window. It provides the foundations for a universe. And firstly, we've got to recognize that we need a bigger picture. We need a bigger world. And that many people out there respond to their world, developing their thinking from a bit like the early astronomers who defined the universe with the Earth at its center. And we've got to move away from that to a bigger universe, which hopefully the Dublin window provides a way forward. And confidence, as I say, the need to create confidence to exist, coexist, cooperate, or collaborate by managing perceptions around your future behaviors is a foundation stone for our thinking. Confidence in your consciousness, what you perceive to be real and reality, confidence in who you are, your purpose and purposefulness, confidence in others to help not harm you, confidence others having you in your purposefulness, and what we call zeitgeist confidence, a mood of the time where confidence or lack of can create peace, wars, financial success, failure, and more. Yet we believe that confidence is a critical known unknown. In the task of managing confidence and creating confidence, purpose and purposefulness makes it easier to create confidence, gives coherence about why you're here, what you're doing, enables you to be more compelling to others, and a greater connectiveness. So with that sort of step 1 of the need for a bigger universe of thinking, Anne, any thoughts or observations on that?
Well, this is a huge topic, and I think we could spend about 10 hours talking about philosophies of, what does it mean? What does reality mean, etc., etc. But I think there's 1 or 2 things that are really clear about our modern world. First of all, we've seen, haven't we, over this last few years, especially the weaponization of information. If we observe the current war in Ukraine, that really brings it to the fore that information, communication, propaganda, we might call it, is a front in this war. And also, it's used for good as well. So in the recent pandemic, we saw communication keeping life safe, keeping people safe. And what we found out and what we needed to learn about how we should behave, etc., was crucially important, keeping not only ourselves, but society safe. So there's weaponization for good and for bad, if you like. But also we find some other things that are going on. So I think, for example, the whole sort of ethos of social media and the way that that sort of universe operates is to make us quite narcissistic and be very self-oriented. And also some of the confusion about what's going on in the world. We can talk about the various tensions that are there, globalization, political divergence, etc., 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 is making people very unsure. And therefore, we've got this sort of dichotomy of the importance and power of information and communication, and then people being quite uncertain about who they are, what they're here to do. In our conversation just before we started this recording, we were saying that, if you go online, you know yourself that some of your own contributions are just noise. But you feel that you have to be there, you have to be in the conversation. But if you are adding value to that conversation, you have to ask yourself the question. So I think this whole area of confidence and being purposeful is a really conflicted and contested area. So in some ways, people are more confident than ever to voice their views, and they feel they have to, otherwise they're going to be ignored. But alongside that goes the question about to what purpose. And therefore, I think the notion about being confident and what are you here to do is really important. And you talked about what's your purpose, and we're seeing, this trend in organizations as well. The whole move to ESG and purposeful organizations is driving thinking about our own role in those organizations as well. And, I see our role very much here in the purpose discussion in organizations is about asking those questions around, purpose washing, but also what does it mean for an organization to have a purpose? How does it change its very DNA? And those questions we have to ask for ourselves as well. And I have a confession to make, Andy.
Indeed.
I don't feel that I've ever really had a purpose.
Yeah.
I hope I'm a relatively decent human being and I want to make the world a better place, but I can't give you my purpose. But what I know is I'm driven by certain values, and I'm driven to try and, communicate and connect with people and to try and make the world a better place, but I can't define it. Am I confident in what I do? And am I confident that I don't harm other people? Well, I try very much to not harm other people. That's driven partly because of my own, faith. And so I have a purpose that's driven around having a faith as well. And do I try to connect with the real world, and do I try to understand what's going on in the world, the zeitgeist, and am I in tune with what's going on in the world? Well, I hope so, but I don't always agree with it, and there's something here about not just going along with what everybody else believes and holds to be true and holds to be of value. Sometimes, you need to be stand up and be counted. And therefore, this is almost an incoherent answer that I'm giving you. But I think this whole area here is one of immense complexity and immense difficulty. And it links to us as people, what do we stand for, what do we believe, what are we driven by, but also our role, because we've got a professional persona as well. What's our role in our organizations? And these are things that can't be answered very quickly or with any sense of, one answer is right. Many answers are right. And what's coherent and compelling and connecting in one context is not necessarily coherent, compelling, and connecting in another context, So I'm rambling, Andy, but
no. So I think we're both in agreement about respecting complexity and actually. In the incoherence, there may be coherence in terms of an honest candor about that. So, and maybe reflections that there may be the concepts of purpose may need to evolve, maybe a capital P purpose and a lowercase purpose, perhaps, to say all ideas there that, as I say, indicate that it gives us a space to identify really maybe scope of some of the conversations we need to be having here.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say to somebody, what is your purpose? Because we are not like organizations. Organizations are structured and, they are created by people to do certain things. We're not like that as human beings. We're much more complex than that. And therefore, to ask somebody to say, well, what is to demand an answer to that, what's your purpose, it depends. It depends what situation I'm in, who I'm talking to, whether it's me, whether it's my organizational self, and you can give several answers to that. But I do absolutely agree that we should be purposeful, otherwise we just drift around in life. And do you know what your drivers are? Do you know what you're trying to achieve? These are really important questions.
Yeah, thank you. We move on to the next stage, and that so we're saying step 2, and this is ideas really influenced by the work of behavioural psychologists like Professor Daniel Kahneman and Robert Cialdini, and where we're recognising that people are emotionally driven. But if you need to successfully connect with others, these sort of 5 rule of thumbs, we call the 5 rules, that if you get known and noticed, liked, and that goes beyond Facebook likes, and goes beyond just liking. It could be respect and admired, trusted, front of mind, and even though you might be known, at the time people make decisions, you need to be front of mind, or being talked about, social proof. And this works really in 2 dimensions. One as a sort of a universe of thinking, so that if you're exploring issues, say for example, of trust, believe perhaps it needs perhaps in the context of the known, like, trusted, front of mind being talked about, and also at a tactical level that we believe it actually frames any campaign brief needs to address these 5 core questions of how do we need to be known and noticed, how do we need to be liked, how do we need to be trusted, how do we need to be front of mind, or how do we need to be talked about. So just wonder, Anne, if any thoughts on this idea or these ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I can't argue against them at all.
Is there anything we need to add, anything missing, or anything that's more important than the others?
Well, a couple of observations. I think they're quite self-oriented, these. This is about me. Me being known and noticed, like, trusted, front of mind, etc., etc. And I think I'd like to see something added there is about the other. So to socially connect, to successfully socially connect with others, you also need some other things, and some characteristics, if you like, that others are going to say, well, I want to connect with that person because they also are empathetic with me. They also understand and they take an interest in me, and these are really elements of being trusted, I guess, really. And I was
also going to add being liked as well, that you like those dimensions. So perhaps in our reflection on this, that the need to elaborate on those very points you're saying now.
I think it's what lies beneath these things, really, that's really important. And I've got a little mnemonic, I think, which I often use in these situations. I call it ICE, so which is very cool. But and I think, what is it that makes you attractive, but what also makes other people want to work with you, because there's something for them in it as well. And so ICE is about, they understand you're a person of integrity. They want to work with people who have integrity and who are in whom they can invest their trust. So if you are trusted, there's another party to that, and that they feel that they're going to get something from that trusting relationship. So integrity. You need to be competent. That's the C in ICE, So you have something that is valuable to them. That might be knowledge, that might be a skill, that might be because they've got something that can be learned and that you're going to share with them. So again, you're thinking about the other, it's about sharing. And then the E in ICE is about empathy. So it's about the ability to step into their shoes and try and live their lives. So there's something about thinking about the other and what's in it for the other, rather than what are the characteristics that we should have, that I think is an important dimension that underpins a lot of what you're suggesting here, but maybe needs to be made a bit more explicit.
Thank you. And then the third step is really about what we call the 5 open choices of how you connect with others. And the 5 open choices are not channels. You may look how it's evolved from what's called the PESO model, which identifies channels, but opens is about identifies choices, both at a strategic and tactical level, how you connect. And the own, it goes far beyond owned media channels, but your own behaviors, your own reputation, even your own time, that spending time with someone can help earn trust. Paid for includes advertising, but there's much more, anything you have to pay for to achieve. Earned goes beyond earned editorial, search engine optimization, word of mouth, and so on. And a new dimension here of like nudge of how you influence people by the availability of choices, making options simpler and so on beyond that, and also being mindful of need to act ethically in this area. And lastly, shared. So it's a really sort of expansion beyond what they called the PESO model to opens. And any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I think the nudge one is qualitatively different from the others, and it is difficult to disassociate them from channels, as you say.
Yeah.
But nudge is really nudge is, I guess, the four, excluding nudge, is there's a level of reciprocity here. You know, you might own, it's your behaviors, but you're moderated by other people. You know, what you pay for, you get feedback on your advertising or whatever, and they can actually do something with that or not. Whereas with nudge, this just seems, there's a sort of question under this, which is, well, nudge to do what, but also what right have I to nudge? You know, because it implies that I know the good thing or the right thing or the best thing to do, and therefore I'm nudging people. Now, that's maybe not what you're trying to imply here, but so maybe there's something here about reciprocity again that needs to be put in there, because again, this is about me trying to get other people to do something, take down barriers or whatever, and maybe it's nudge and be nudged.
Absolutely.
So be open to you having your behavior changed, you know, and be open to be directed in other directions, because, you know, you, through conversations that you might have, because you share something, you are the person who's nudged, you know.
I mean, I just wonder whether you've created a concept there of reciprocity quotient, which could possibly be a dimension of own that, you know, in terms of your own characters and qualities, but certainly a key quality there. And just to add, the Conversations in its toolkit has provided a nudge tool to enable practitioners to engage with, but also it does carry I think we may call a health warning. And I think there's a belief here that if you make people better consumers, that may in itself provide a positive contribution to that ethical debate. So as I say,
I mean, this goes to a deeper conversation, I think, about the whole orientation of behavioral science, you know, which is about somebody knows best, and they have a right to change your behavior. And I think we need to be really careful about that. You know, there are things that are good for us, like stopping smoking and, you know, not being obese, etc., and having barriers removed so that we can do those things. Fine. But there's just a note of caution here. I notice, you know, every campaign now that I see is about behavior change. You know, I'm having my behavior changed by 500,000 people, you know, and they're all nudging me. And I sort of think, well, hang on a minute. Is that the world that we're trying to create through this Dublin conversation? I don't think so. You know, this is about us having a conversation so collectively we can decide what's best for us. So, you know, of course, great benefit, but there has to be a caution. And I do wonder about the instrumentality of some of what's going on at the moment.
Which brings us then really to step 4 about, there's a simple model here developed by Professor Gareth Loudon of Imperial College London that explains really creativity and how we do and make things in a very simple concept, what he calls the LCD model, the listen, connect, do. So it's a process of listening and listening with every sense, connecting what you've heard with your context, doing, and that could be practical action as well as developing it as conceptually. And then you can see a continuous loop of listen, connect, do, listen, connect, do. And really sort of the pace and intensity of that sort of action and that dynamic is driven by your sense of purpose. And in addition, so critically, we live in a world which is defined by emergence. So in the world we live and breathe and operate within has emerged, and therefore the more you can listen, connect, do effectively, the more potential for realizing your purpose. And there's a need to listen to both bottom up and top down. And within our world, a label's emerged called comms, but there's no formal definition of it. And the Dublin Conversations is not advocating the word comms be instantly adopted, but there is definitely a need for a candidate label that goes beyond integrated communications to include, we mentioned before, around about influencing behaviours, wider purposefulness and social cohesion. And we're suggesting that as comms can be defined as how you create confidence to exist, coexist, cooperate, or collaborate by managing perceptions around your future behaviours. And that also emerging from the world around you are two prime instincts. Work in the field of sociology identifies that 2 out of 3 people will help a stranger, which also means that 1 out of 3 don't. And we're suggesting that there's 2 significant instincts here of what we call labeled we-led thinking, where your instinct when you get a new information, new situation, is to react of thinking of the collective good, thinking of others first. And alternatively, me-led thinking, where you think of your self-interest first. So in really the need for to recognise emergence and how we listen and connect, do, and any observations here at all?
Yeah, well, I like this. It's very much sort of almost like strategic planning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do your research, do, and
Yeah.
connect and do, and also like Kolb's learning cycle.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that you've got reflection there, because I
Yeah.
think there are 3 elements, 4 elements, so an additional element to the 3 that you've got.
Yeah.
So listen, connect, do, evaluate, reflect.
Yeah.
And then listen, connect, do, evaluate. Because without that built-in element of just standing back and saying, like, I've listened, I've connected, I've done, what are the results of that doing?
Yeah.
Before you listen, connect, and do again, I think is a really important element. So I'd like to see the reflection in the model that I can see there.
Yeah.
Brought up as an essential part of the model rather than
Yeah.
just being surrounding it. Absolutely right. You have to listen bottom up and top down and sideways.
Yes.
Yeah. And comms as a label. Oof, where do we go with the debate about what we call our profession? I have concerned about comms in that we do more than communicate. For me, communicate is the speaking, listening, that bit, the doing, the connecting bit in the middle. But if you think about our role within an organization, often our role is about governance.
Yeah.
We declare that this is our purpose or these are our values. This activity, this business decision is against our purpose and our values. We can't do this because, etc. That's nothing about communication. That's about you being there as the conscience of the organization, holding it to account, being, if you like, the activist within the organization, asking the difficult questions and making sure that all those things that our ambition is, which organizations and you personally as a communicator are trusted, have to underpin the actual communication bit. And it is about, integrity, and it is about governance, whether that's organizational governance or self-governance. So I've got a bit of an aversion to the word comms, because comms for me is the connecting bit that is absolutely crucial to our role, because everything is done through communication. The world doesn't exist, organizations, we can't exist as meaningful individuals without communication, but it's so much more than that as well. So I think you're right in terms of me and we-led thinking. Of course, if we're going to have purpose, as the Dublin conversation suggests, or if we have a recognized driver, if you like, then there is a me in there, you know, because you want to associate with certain things yourself. But yeah, if you're going to make those connections, of course, you have to have the integrity, empathy, and competence that I spoke about earlier. So you have to think both. It's, well, what do I want to achieve here? But what do we want to achieve? And if there's an alignment there, nirvana. If there isn't an alignment, then there's some difficult questions to ask, which is about, do I need to change? Or actually, in this case, here I stand, I can do no other, and I'm going to do whatever I can to persuade you to the best of my ability to change, you know. So those are the conversations that are difficult, fraught, complex, and require a lot of reflection, which is why I think that actually incorporate reflection or evaluation into the three: connect, you know, listen, connect, do, evaluate, is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think what you've identified in our conversation, and there aren't any easy answers, but hopefully we'll be on a journey where we can come up with better questions.
Well, yes, absolutely. It's all about questions.
Yeah. Okay. Which then, like the last stage, which is a concept around an idea developed by Professor Jim McNamara in Australia, where he talked about the distrust-trust continuum, where you can be under trusting, disengaged at the one extreme, and at the other extreme, over trusting and yet disengaged from mainstream society, alienated through having a very narrow worldview, set of beliefs that define your perspective. So really is the foundation for prejudice and bias and dogma. And yet there's a middle zone there, what we've labeled the purposeful trust zone. So purposeful trust enables you to be open to understanding others. It's precious because it enables social cohesion. It bonds us together. We cannot, we believe, coexist, cooperate, or collaborate without it. So in communications practice, is there a way forward where we not only need to be earning confidence and maybe also exploring areas of influence and the behaviors of others, communicating with others, but also at the same time, do we need to be conscious of investing in social cohesion, ensuring that this asset of purposeful trust is nurtured and grown and protected and not destroyed, which could really sort of say lead to quite profound consequences for our society going forward. And any thoughts on this aspect?
Well, I would absolutely agree with what you're trying to achieve here, because I think what's quite worrying, to be sort of dark for a moment, is, you know, the lack of social cohesion that we do observe, and sort of this fragmentation. And I mentioned it right at the beginning, where we're becoming very narcissistic, and it's a selfish society in many ways. But in other ways, you know, there's been a new awakening. If we think about some of the activism that's gone on about climate change, that's about we, you know. So you again, this sort of polarization where increasing self-orientation, but also a sense that, you know, we do all have a collective responsibility to society, and people are more or less connected to either of those dimensions. You know, they are more or less self-orientated, more or less society orientated, and we're somewhere in the middle, most of us. Therefore, you know, to actually capture a space where we can engage people, you know, so yeah, of course we have our individual rights, if you like, you know, which we want other people to defend, but we also understand our responsibilities to make a contribution as well is really important. So trust in understanding and trying to bring together people obviously is crucial to this. I'm really interested in your word purposeful trust there. And I guess again the question comes forward, which is about, well, whose purpose, you know, how do we get consensus around what is the right areas to actually collaborate on and cooperate on and move forward for? I think in communication practice, of course, we have to earn trust, and we've got to invest in doing the right things, and being people of integrity, as I mentioned. So I can't argue with that. I'm not going to argue over semantics and words, because I don't think that's particularly helpful. But this idea of not being naive, being intelligently skeptic, is important, as well as, you know, creating the conditions whereby people can trust us and trust the things that we're invested in. Yeah.
Okay, so really, after the 5 stages there, we've taken you on a 5-step journey, which potentially has provided a way to step outside the rooms we currently exist in, and provide an alternative potential universe to look at the world. And the question is, after doing the 5 steps, do you feel more confident about addressing this question of what does better look like? And having done the 5 steps to the Dublin window, how do you feel about the question about how do you feel more confident about addressing what does better look like?
No, because I think what you've done, which is really helpful, is to sort of stimulate some more thinking. And you have to go through a process, don't you, where you think, well, actually, I'm questioning more, and that's good. That's a result as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So I think there's all sorts of things, as I say, we could have added to the conversation, all sorts of windows. It opens up to other windows, you know. So I think I'd like to congratulate you on the work that you've done.
Thank you.
I don't really know what to do with what we've discussed. And I think that the tools that you've had will be really helpful to actually think through more carefully what's involved in what you're suggesting here. It would be great to see a rationale for why the 5 steps have been put together as they have been done. Because I think there's other things that could be included in this, and you have to put some boundaries around somewhere. There's absolutely nothing wrong with what you've done. You know, for me, it's just generated a load more questions, and I could add about another 10 steps to what you've suggested here. You know, and that, I think that is a result.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that with not only doing the conversations like this, but also, as you mentioned, our toolkit, we've got over 35 tools to put the new thinking into immediate practice. And again, wanting feedback on how they could be improved, and also 4 green papers and a dictionary to provide a deeper dive into the new thinking. And really, where the Dublin conversation is coming from is not saying it's got the answer, but we're provoking hopefully a more purposeful conversation.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, for me, the next step is exactly, what does better look like? I think, as you know, starting a conversation in our community about what does good look like is a really valuable contribution, and we ought to be doing it. As I say, I think we're in you call it a moment of luminosity, you know, where we're in a liminal moment really here, where the world is absolutely changing rapidly, and we don't know quite how things are going to turn out in a whole range of dimensions. What we do know is communication, and communication with integrity, and I use your word communication. As I say, I think the label is not entirely satisfactory, is at the heart of trying to find solutions to this. And for us remaining, you know, as a viable planet at the end of the day, and I don't think it's less a question than that, you know, because unless we have hard and difficult conversations about hard and difficult things, we are not going to survive as a species in a beautiful world. But if we do have those conversations, and we do have honesty, and we do have those in situations where we feel we can trust each other, as you rightly say, then there's a possible way forward for us. And we, as professional communicators, need to be at the heart of driving that possibility.
And with that point there, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.